I heard my daughter's voice through the hospital wall, light and bright, with something I hadn't heard in years. She was laughing. The plane had gone down 3 days ago somewhere over Montana. A controlled descent, they called it, though nothing about those 7 minutes felt controlled. I remembered the oxygen masks dropping like strange yellow fruit, the way the woman beside me had gripped my hand so hard I thought my bones would break, the prayer I whispered to Robert, even though he'd been dead for 8 years. The impact had been brutal but survivable. 43 passengers walked away. 11 of us were carried. I was in room 247 of St. Catherine's Medical Centre with 4 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone and a concussion that made the fluorescent lights feel like knives. The doctors said I was lucky. They said I'd need time. They said someone should stay with me. No one had come. I had called Diana's number 17 times from the nurse's phone. Each call went to voicemail. "Mom, I can't talk right now. Mom, I'm in a meeting. Mom, can this wait?" It could not wait. I had survived a plane crash, but Diana was busy. Diana was always busy. The morphine made everything soft around the edges, turned the pain into something distant and manageable, but it couldn't blur the sound of her voice coming from the hallway outside my room. She must have been standing right by the door, phone pressed to her ear, unaware that hospital walls were thin as paper. "No, Mother's gone," she said, and her voice had that particular brightness that comes from relief, from a burden lifted. The airline confirmed it this morning. They found her seat number in the unrecoverable section. I lay very still. The machines beside me beeped their steady rhythm. An IV drip measured out clear fluid drop by drop. My mouth tasted like metal and old fear. I know, Diana continued, her voice dropping to something conspiratorial. I feel terrible saying this, but Robert, honestly, it's a blessing in disguise. You know how she was getting, all those phone calls about nothing, wanting me to visit every weekend, acting like I don't have my own life. She paused. Someone was speaking on the other end. "Already done," Diana said. "I have power of attorney, remember? Had it for 2 years. The house goes on the market Monday. Janice from Coldwell Banker is handling it. Says we can clear $450 easy, maybe $5 if we stage it right. And the accounts, well, everything transfers automatically within 72 hours once we file the death certificate." My hands lay still on the white hospital blanket. I studied them as if they belonged to someone else. 73 years old. Liver spots like continents. Wedding ring worn thin after 52 years of marriage. These hands had raised a daughter, changed her diapers, held her through nightmares, taught her to braid hair and balance a checkbook and stand up for herself. These hands had signed power of attorney 2 years ago because Diana said it would make things easier. Just in case, Mom. Just to help you out when things get complicated. I had trusted her. The realtor's coming tomorrow to do the walkthrough, Diana was saying. Her voice had that busy, efficient tone she used at her marketing firm, the one that meant she was solving problems, checking boxes, moving forward. I'll need to clear out the personal items first, donate most of it probably. Some of that furniture might be worth something, if we can find the right vintage dealer. That furniture, the walnut dining table Robert had refinished by hand, the grandfather clock his father had brought from Germany, the rocking chair where I had nursed Diana through colic and teething and all those sleepless infant nights. Donate most of it, probably. Oh, and I'm meeting with her financial advisor Tuesday. Apparently, there's a life insurance policy I didn't know about. Not huge, but it'll cover the funeral costs at least. I'm thinking cremation. Simple. No need for anything elaborate. No need. I had planned my funeral with Robert before he died. Had it all written down in the blue folder in my desk. The hymns I wanted, the passages from Corinthians, the plot beside Robert in Oakwood Cemetery where we'd reserved 2 spaces 20 years ago. Simple cremation. No need for anything elaborate. Emma's been texting me non-stop, Diana said, and her voice softened slightly at her daughter's name. My granddaughter, 22 years old, starting graduate school in the fall. She's devastated, of course. But you know, Mom, she'll want to make it all about her grief. I'll need to manage that, keep her focused on her studies. The machines beeped. The IV dripped. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them one by one. Honestly, Robert, between you and me, Diana's voice dropped even lower. I know I'm supposed to feel devastated, and I do. I really do. But there's also this, I don't know, this lightness, like I can finally breathe. No more guilt trips about not visiting enough. No more 3-hour phone calls about what she had for breakfast. No more, she paused, no more feeling like I'm failing her just by having my own life. The call ended shortly after that. I heard her heels clicking away down the linoleum hallway. That brisk, decisive walk that meant she had places to be, things to accomplish, a life that was finally, blessedly, free of the burden of a mother who needed too much. I lay in room 247 and felt something shift inside me. Not grief, not shock, something colder, something that tasted like clarity. The nurse came in 20 minutes later to check my vitals. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and quick hands. "How are we feeling, Margaret?" she asked, adjusting the IV. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I started. My voice came out rough, scraped raw. "I need you not to tell anyone I'm awake." She paused, her hand still on the IV stand. "I need a few days," I said, "before anyone knows." "Is that Can you do that?" She studied my face for a long moment. I wondered what she saw there. An old woman. Broken bones. Survival. "Your daughter called 4 times today," she said carefully, "asking about your condition." "I know." She seemed very concerned. I know what she seemed. The nurse looked at me for another moment, then nodded slowly. "The concussion protocol requires 48 hours of observation anyway," she said. "Sometimes patients slip in and out of consciousness. Hard to say exactly when they're lucid. Hard to predict when they'll be ready for visitors." 48 hours, I repeated, at least. After she left, I turned my head carefully on the pillow and looked out the window. It was mid-September. The maple trees were just starting to turn, those first few leaves going gold at the edges. I had been Margaret Hartwell for 73 years, mother to Diana for 51, widow for 8. For the next 48 hours, I would be no one at all. And in that space between dead and alive, I would decide who I wanted to be when I came back. The hospital discharged me on the 6th day, not as Margaret Hartwell, survivor of Flight 447. That woman was officially among the deceased, her name added to the manifest of souls lost somewhere over Montana. Her obituary running in the Tribune beside a photo Diana must have pulled from Facebook. Me at Emma's college graduation, smiling in a blue dress I'd bought on sale at Macy's. I left as Margaret Fletcher, a name I borrowed from my mother's maiden name and Robert's middle name, a woman with no history and no obligations. The social worker who helped with my paperwork asked no questions. She'd seen enough trauma to know that sometimes survival requires reinvention. I had $437 in my wallet from a trip to the ATM the day before the flight. My credit cards were useless, everything tied to an account Diana now controlled. My phone had been destroyed in the crash. Everything I owned was either in the house Diana was preparing to sell or in the overhead bin of a plane scattered across a mountainside. I had nothing. I had never been so free. The airline put me in a hotel downtown, a Marriott, that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and other people's lives. They were efficient about it, apologetic, their legal department already moving to contain liability before lawsuits could form. A representative visited me the second day, a young man in an expensive suit who couldn't meet my eyes when he talked about the settlement offer. "Substantial," he said, "very substantial, given the circumstances." The airline wanted to resolve matters quickly, compassionately, with minimal stress for the families. I was not family. I was the deceased. But Margaret Fletcher, my hospital alias, was a passenger who had survived. "We're prepared to offer $1.2 million, he said, sliding papers across the hotel room desk. "Full medical coverage for life, counselling services, and a confidentiality agreement, of course." Of course. I signed as Margaret Fletcher. The pen felt heavy in my hand. He left looking relieved. I sat in the hotel room and stared at the papers that promised me more money than I'd ever had in my name alone. Robert had always handled the finances. Then Diana had taken them over, bit by bit, convincing me I was forgetting things, mixing up numbers, that it would be easier if she just managed it all. Easier for her. I turned on the television and found the local news. They were still covering the crash. Though the story had moved from breaking news to human interest, interviews with survivors, tributes to those who had died. There was Diana standing in front of my house, in a black suit that looked new. Her hair was professionally styled. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like someone who had lost something precious but was bearing up bravely under the weight of grief. My mother was an incredible woman, she told the reporter, her voice catching just slightly in all the right places. She raised me alone after my father passed. She taught me everything about strength and resilience. I just wish I'd had more time with her. The camera panned to show the for sale sign newly planted in the front lawn. I know she'd want the house to go to a family who could love it the way she did, Diana continued. It's too painful for me to keep it. Too many memories. The reporter nodded sympathetically. And your daughter, how is she coping? Emma's devastated, Diana said. She and her grandmother were very close. I'm trying to protect her from the worst of it. She's young. She doesn't need to be burdened with all the estate details and legal matters. I can handle that. I turned off the television. The room was very quiet. Through the window, I could see the city moving on with its evening. Cars streaming down streets, lights coming on in apartments, people cooking dinner, helping children with homework, living their ordinary, precious lives. I had been invisible in my own life. A function, not a person. Someone to call when you needed something. Someone to dismiss when you didn't. I would not be invisible anymore. Over the next 10 days, I lived like a ghost, haunting my own funeral. I rented a car under my new name, drove past my house at different times of day, watched from parking lots and side streets as Diana moved through her performance of grief. The realtor came twice, a woman in a red blazer who took photos of every room, who stood in my kitchen and talked about staging and curb appeal and the excellent bones of a 1960s ranch. Diana walked her through like a tour guide. This was her favourite chair. This is where she liked to read. Past tense, memory, already gone. I watched from across the street, parked in a car Diana wouldn't recognise, wearing sunglasses and a hat I'd bought at Target. On the third day, I saw Diana loading boxes into her Mercedes. Not the careful, respectful packing of treasured items. She was moving fast, efficiently, the way you clean out a storage unit you don't want anymore. A box tipped over as she set it down. Photo albums spilled onto the driveway. Diana glanced at them, irritated, then kicked them aside and kept loading. I sat in my rental car and watched those albums lying in the driveway, their pages fluttering open in the September wind. Our family scattered across concrete. Robert holding Diana as a baby, Diana's first day of school, our silver anniversary. No one picked them up. When Diana left, I waited 20 minutes to be sure she wouldn't come back. Then I got out of the car and crossed the street. My street, the one I'd walked every day for 32 years. The one where I knew every crack in the sidewalk, every neighbour's dog, every tree planted in memory of someone's loved one. The albums were still there. I knelt carefully, my ribs still healing, and gathered them up. The photos were bent, dirt-smudged, some torn where they'd been stuck to the plastic sleeves. There was Robert at 40, before the cancer, holding a fish he'd caught at Lake Michigan. There was Diana at 16, awkward in her prom dress, angry at me for some teenage slight I couldn't remember. There was my wedding photo, professional, formal, the two of us looking impossibly young and serious. Robert in his navy uniform, me in the dress I'd saved 6 months to buy. Someone, Diana, had drawn a line through it with permanent marker, a single black slash, like she was crossing me out, like I was something that needed to be erased. I stood in my old driveway, holding my wedding photo with a marker drawn through my face, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot, reactive, something that burned itself out. This was colder, clearer, more like bedrock. I carried the albums back to my car and drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of town. Paid for a small unit in cash, locked the albums away where they'd be safe. When I got back to the hotel, there was a message from the airline's legal department. The settlement had been processed. The money was being held in escrow pending the completion of paperwork. $1.2 million. Diana was selling my house for maybe half that, taking my savings, my life insurance, my investment accounts, everything Robert and I had built in 52 years of marriage. She thought she was getting it all. She had no idea what was coming. I sat at the hotel desk and made a list. Not of what I'd lost, of what I was going to do. The list was short, precise. Each item had a checkbox beside it. At the top, in my careful handwriting, I wrote, "Choose who deserves my legacy." Below that, "Protect Emma." And below that, underlined twice, "Make sure Diana understands what she threw away." The next morning, I called the one person I knew would help me and wouldn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Grace Wu Law Offices, the receptionist said. "Grace, please," I said, "tell her it's Margaret Hartwell's." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Ma'am, but I know what the news says," I interrupted. "Tell her I'm calling from beyond the grave. She'll understand. Another pause, longer this time. Then Grace's voice came on the line, sharp and certain as always. "Margaret, what the hell is going on?" "I need a lawyer," I said, "and I need you to keep a secret." "How alive are you? Alive enough to change my will?" Grace was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, "When can you come in?" "Tomorrow. But not at your office, somewhere Diana won't see us. Coffee shop on Maple and 3rd, 9 a.m. And Margaret?" "Yes?" "I'm going to need to hear this whole story." "You will," I promised. "Every word." I hung up and looked at my list again. The first checkbox was still empty, but not for long. Grace Wu had been Robert's lawyer and then mine for 23 years. She'd handled the estate when he died, walked me through probate with the patience of someone who understood that grief made simple things impossible. She was 62, sharp as glass, and kept a photo of her wife and their 3 daughters on her desk where other lawyers kept diplomas. We met at the coffee shop on Maple and 3rd at exactly 9 a.m. Grace was already there, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall, a habit from her years as a public defender. She looked at me the way doctors look at patients who were supposed to be dead. "You look terrible," she said. "Plane crash. I saw the news. Your daughter gave a very moving interview." I sat down carefully. My ribs still ached when I moved wrong. "Diana has power of attorney," I said. "She thinks I'm dead. She's selling my house, liquidating my accounts, planning a simple cremation." Grace set down her coffee. "Tell me everything." So I did. The hospital, the overheard phone call, the for sale sign, the albums in the driveway, the marked wedding photo, all of it laid out in the morning light of a coffee shop, while around us people ordered lattes and checked their phones and lived their uncomplicated lives. Grace listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How dead do you want to stay?" she finally asked. "As long as it takes." "Takes for what?" "For her to show me exactly who she is." Grace pulled a legal pad from her bag, the same yellow kind she'd always used, and started writing. "The power of attorney becomes void the moment you're confirmed alive," she said. "But that only matters if you want to reclaim your identity. If you stay Margaret Fletcher," Diana continues, "as executor of Margaret Hartwell's estate, what about the settlement money? That's in your new name, completely separate. Diana can't touch it even if she knew it existed." I watched Grace write, her handwriting quick and precise. "What can we do, legally, right now?" "Not much while you're still officially deceased, but we can prepare, set up trusts, draft new documents, establish ironclad protections that activate the moment you resurface." She looked up. "The question is what you want to happen when you do." What did I want? I thought about Diana at 16, crying in my arms when her boyfriend broke her heart. Diana at 25, calling me from her first real job, so excited she could barely speak. Diana at 38, exhausted and overwhelmed with a newborn Emma, letting me hold her while she sobbed about how hard it all was. When had that girl disappeared? Or had she always been someone I wanted her to be rather than someone she actually was? "I want Emma protected," I said. "Whatever Diana can't touch, I want it set up for Emma, everything. And Diana gets nothing." Grace studied my face. "You're sure?" "Write it down," I said. "Make it so airtight she can't break it, even if she tries." So she did. Over the next hour, Grace outlined a plan. A trust for Emma with me as grantor, Grace as trustee, distributions tied to milestones and needs that Diana couldn't manipulate or control. A new will, documents that would revoke every piece of authority Diana currently held the moment I resurfaced. "You'll need to establish residency somewhere else," Grace said. "Set up your new identity properly. Bank accounts, lease, utilities. Make Margaret Fletcher real. Where? Somewhere Diana won't accidentally run into you. Somewhere you can observe without being seen." I thought about that. There's a town 40 minutes south, Millbrook, small, quiet, perfect. Grace made a note. "I'll get everything drafted this week, but Margaret, once you sign these documents, once you establish this new identity, you're committed. You can't just undo this. I don't want to undo it. And when you finally do reveal yourself, then Diana learns what it costs to throw someone away." Grace looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll call you when the papers are ready." We stood. She gripped my hand, her fingers strong and steady. "For what it's worth," she said, "I always thought she took you for granted." "So did I," said. "I just didn't want to believe it mattered." I found an apartment in Millbrook 3 days later, a 1-bedroom above a bookstore on the town's main street, the kind of place that rented month to month and didn't ask too many questions when you paid cash. The landlord was a woman in her 70s who looked at my bruises and asked nothing. "First month and deposit," she said. "Utilities included, laundry in the basement." I gave her the money from my shrinking cash supply. The settlement wouldn't clear for another week. The apartment was small, furnished with things that didn't match. But the windows overlooked the street and filled the space with afternoon light. I had a bed, a table, a chair, a coffee maker that sputtered but worked. It was enough. It was more than enough. That first night in Millbrook, I sat at the window and watched people walking to dinner, to the grocery store, to their ordinary lives. Nobody knew me. Nobody needed anything from me. Nobody was taking inventory of my usefulness. The silence in that apartment had weight, texture. I could feel it pressing against my ribs like something physical. But it was my silence, my space, my choice to be there. I had not chosen anything in a very long time. The next morning I drove back to my old town. Not my town anymore, just the place where my house was being sold. and parked across from the elementary school 3 blocks from my house. From there, I could see without being obvious. Diana's Mercedes pulled up at 10:30. Behind it, a white Lexus. The realtor in her red blazer got out first, then a couple in their 40s, holding hands, looking eager. They stood in my driveway while the realtor talked about square footage and the excellent school district, and how rare it was to find a home with such character at this price point. Character. As if a house was something you could quantify and sell. They went inside. I waited. 45 minutes later, they came back out. The couple was smiling. The woman was taking photos with her phone. The man had his arm around her waist. Diana shook their hands. Professional, warm, bereaved but coping. She'd always been good at performing. After they left, Diana stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house. Just looking. I wondered what she saw. A financial asset, a burden removed, the place where she'd been raised. She pulled out her phone, made a call, spoke for a few minutes. Even from across the street, I could see her posture change. Shoulders squared, voice animated, the body language of good news being shared. She was celebrating. I drove back to Millbrook and didn't go back for 3 days. The settlement cleared on a Tuesday morning. $1.2 million appeared in Margaret Fletcher's bank account like magic. Like something that couldn't possibly be real. I sat in my apartment above the bookstore and stared at the number on my phone screen. In 52 years of marriage, I had never had more than $2,000 in an account with only my name on it. Robert had believed in joint accounts, shared finances, partnership. And after he died, Diana had gradually taken over to help you, Mum, until I was signing documents I didn't fully understand and watching my own money become something I had to ask permission to access. Now I had more money than I knew what to do with, and nobody to ask. I called Grace. It came through, I said. Good, come in tomorrow. We'll finalise the trust paperwork. The trust was elegant in its simplicity. Emma would receive distributions for education, housing, medical expenses. Real needs, not luxuries Diana could manipulate or control. The principal would be protected until Emma turned 30, old enough to manage it herself. And most importantly, Diana had no access, no oversight, no way to insert herself between her daughter and the security I was building for her. Grace walked me through each clause, each protection, each carefully worded phrase designed to create a wall Diana couldn't breach. She'll challenge it, Grace said, the moment she finds out. Can she win? Not if we do this right. You're of sound mind. I'll document that extensively. You have every right to leave your money to whoever you choose. I signed my new name, Margaret Fletcher, in careful strokes across 8 different pages. When do we tell Emma? Grace asked. Soon. But I need to see her first, without Diana. That might be difficult, I know. But Emma made it easy. She posted on Instagram 3 days later a photo of a coffee shop in Millbrook, 30 miles from her graduate program at Northwestern. "Exploring new study spots," the caption read, with a heart emoji and a coffee cup. Millbrook, my Millbrook. I sat in my apartment and looked at the photo for a long time. Then I drove to that coffee shop and waited. She came in at 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, that particular kind of distracted focus college students wear like armour. 22 years old, Robert's eyes, my stubborn chin. All the best parts of both of us, somehow surviving Diana's attempts to mould her into something more useful. I hadn't seen her in person since the crash. In my old life, we'd had dinner together every few weeks, me driving up to campus, treating her to the good Italian place she loved. Listening to her talk about her classes and her thesis and the professor who didn't understand her research approach. Diana didn't come to those dinners. Too busy. Too much work. Emma had cried at those dinners sometimes about the pressure, about her mother's expectations, about feeling like she was never quite enough. I had held her hand and told her she was enough. More than enough. I wondered if she believed me. She ordered a latte and found a table by the window, pulled out her laptop, started typing with the intense concentration of someone trying to meet a deadline. I waited 10 minutes. Then I walked over and sat down across from her. She looked up, annoyed by the intrusion, ready to give whoever it was the polite brush-off college students perfect for dealing with unwanted conversation. Then she saw my face. The laptop nearly slid off the table. "Grandma?" The word came out as a whisper. A question. A prayer. "Hi, sweetheart." Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, confusion, something that might have been anger, then finally tears. She reached across the table and grabbed my hands, her grip so tight it hurt my healing bones. "They said you were dead. Mum said. The airline said. There was a memorial. I spoke at it. She was crying now, not caring that people were staring. "How are you here?" "It's complicated." "I don't care if it's complicated. You're alive. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think?" She stopped. Understanding flickered across her face. "You let Mum think you were dead." It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? So I told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I told her about the phone call I'd overheard in the hospital, about Diana's relief, her efficiency, her immediate liquidation of everything I'd built, about the house being sold, the accounts being drained, the simple cremation planned because there was no need for anything elaborate. Emma sat very still while I talked. Her hands were still holding mine, but her grip had changed from desperation to something harder, angrier. "She told me you'd want me to focus on my studies," Emma said when I finished. "That she'd handle all the estate details so I wouldn't have to be burdened." "She said you'd want that." "What did you want?" "To help. To be part of it. To..." She pulled her hands back. She wouldn't let me in the house. Said it was too painful for me. Said I should remember you the way you were. Emma's voice cracked. She wouldn't even let me have your recipe box. I asked for it. You know, the one with all the cards you'd written out by hand. She said she'd already donated it. The recipe box. Robert had given it to me on our first anniversary. I'd filled it with cards over 50 years, recipes collected and adapted and perfected. Each one written in my handwriting, notes in the margins about what worked, what didn't, memories of who I'd cooked them for, donated. Like something with no value. I have a storage unit, I said quietly, with photo albums. If she donated that recipe box, I don't have it. But I have other things. And Emma, I need you to know something. She looked at me, waiting. I've set up a trust for you. Everything I have. The settlement from the airline, whatever's left of my savings that Diana hasn't already taken, all of it. But it's structured so she can't touch it, can't control it, can't use it to manipulate you. I don't want your money. I want you. I know, sweetheart, and you have me. But you need to be protected from your mother. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then, when I was 16, I heard her on the phone with someone, complaining about having to visit you, about how it was always something with you, how you just wanted attention. She looked at me, her eyes red. I told myself I'd heard wrong, that she was just stressed. That she loved you, of course she did, she just showed it differently. And now I know I heard exactly right. We sat in that coffee shop for 2 more hours. I told her about Millbrook, about Grace, about the plan we were building. She told me about her thesis, about her plans after graduation, about the life she was trying to build that didn't revolve around her mother's expectations. What happens when you come back? She asked as we were leaving. When Mum finds out you're alive, she learns what it costs to throw people away. Emma looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her face before. Not just love or loyalty, pride. Good, she said. She should. We hugged in the parking lot. She held me carefully, aware of my still healing ribs. And I held her the way I'd held her grandmother at 16, at 12, at 6 years old, all those times when Diana was too busy with her own life to notice her daughter needed holding. I love you, Grandma. I love you too. And Emma, don't tell your mother. I know, she said. Trust me, I know. I watched her drive away, then sat in my car for a long time. The afternoon light was turning golden. Soon it would be October. The leaves were already starting to fall. I started the car and drove back to Millbrook, back to my small apartment, back to the life I was building, one careful decision at a time. The recipe box was gone, but I wasn't, and that was going to have to be enough. I waited 2 weeks before I went to see Diana. 2 weeks to let Grace finalize every document, Close every legal loophole, make absolutely certain that when I walked into Diana's office, I would be walking in with power she couldn't touch or undo or manipulate away. 2 weeks for the house sale to close, for the money to transfer into Diana's accounts, for her to believe she had gotten away with it. 2 weeks to decide what I wanted to say to the daughter who had erased me before my body was even cold. Grace called me on a Tuesday morning. Everything's filed, registered, ironclad. The moment you reveal yourself, Diana's power of attorney is void. The trust for Emma is active. Your new will supersedes everything. She'll fight it. Let her. She'll lose. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 73 years old. Healed now, mostly. The bruises from the crash had faded to yellow-green and then to nothing. My ribs no longer ached when I breathed. The concussion had finally cleared, leaving me with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I looked like someone who had survived something. I looked like someone who had decided to stop surviving and start living. "I'm ready," I told Grace. "Then go haunt your daughter." Diana's office was downtown, in a glass tower, 12th floor, corner office with a view of the lake. I'd been there once before, years ago, when she'd first made partner. She'd been so proud. I'd been so proud of her. I wondered when that had stopped being true. The receptionist was young, efficient, guard-dogging the elevator lobby with practiced courtesy. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No, but she'll want to see me." "I'm sorry, but Miss Hartwell's schedule is completely booked today. If you'd like to leave your name, tell her," I said, keeping my voice level and calm, "that Margaret Hartwell is here to discuss the house." The receptionist's expression flickered. Confusion. Then recognition of the name. Then uncertainty. "I'm sorry, but Miss Hartwell's mother passed away last month. If you're here about the estate, I know what the news says. Tell her anyway." She looked at me for a long moment, then picked up the phone. I watched her face change as she spoke quietly into the receiver. Watched her eyes widen. Watched her set the phone down very carefully. "She'll see you now." Diana's office was exactly what I expected. Clean lines, expensive art, photographs of Emma at various ages displayed prominently on the credenza, proof of motherhood, evidence of emotional investment. Nothing of Robert. Nothing of me. Diana was standing when I walked in. Standing very still behind her desk, one hand gripping the edge like she needed something to hold on to. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her. Or maybe that was just the shock, making her look smaller, more fragile, less certain. "You're dead," she said. "I was in the hospital recovering while you sold my house." The colour drained from her face. "That's not... I know about the phone call, Diana. The one where you celebrated, where you talked about how you could finally breathe, where you said I was a burden you were glad to be rid of." She sat down very suddenly. I was in the next room, I continued, my voice still calm, still measured. No screaming, no hysteria, just facts. Room 247, St. Catherine's Medical. You were standing right outside my door. Mum, I watched you put my house on the market. I watched you throw away photo albums in the driveway. I saw the line you drew through my wedding photo. I know about the recipe box Emma asked for that you donated instead of giving to her. Diana's hands were shaking. She clasped them together on the desk. I watched you, I said, erase me. You don't understand. I thought you were dead. I was grieving. I was trying to manage everything alone, and You were relieved. She flinched. You were relieved I was gone. You saw it as freedom. You couldn't even pretend to mourn properly because you were too busy celebrating. That's not fair. Fair? The word came out harder than I intended. I took a breath, stayed measured, stayed controlled. You had power of attorney for 2 years. You convinced me I couldn't manage my own finances. You gradually took over every account, every decision, every aspect of my life, and the moment you thought I was dead, you liquidated everything. I was trying to help. You were trying to control. There's a difference. Diana stood up. She was crying now, but it was angry crying, defensive. You don't know what it was like. Every weekend you wanted me to visit. Every day you called about something. I had my own life, Mum, my own responsibilities. I couldn't be at your beck and call every minute. I called you twice a week. It felt like more, because any call felt like too much. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something real flicker across her face. Not defensiveness, not anger, something like shame. I know I wasn't a perfect daughter, she said quietly, but I loved you. I do love you. I was overwhelmed. And when the airline called and said you'd died, She stopped. I did feel relieved. I'm not proud of that, but I felt relieved. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved, and I just wanted it all to be over so I could stop feeling both. I looked at my daughter and tried to find the girl I'd raised in this woman who had become a stranger. You could have just said no, I said. You could have set boundaries, told me you needed space. I would have listened, I would have understood, but instead you waited for me to die. I didn't wait for. You threw away my wedding photo, Diana. She went very still. You drew a line through my face and threw it in the driveway with everything else you decided had no value. That's not grief. That's not being overwhelmed. That's erasure. The silence in the office was complete. Outside the windows, the city continued its ordinary business. People working, eating lunch, living their uncomplicated lives. I came here to tell you 2 things, I said. First, every legal document you filed as executor of my estate is void. Grace Wu has everything properly registered. The power of attorney you held is null. The house sale money? That's going into a legal dispute that you will lose." Diana's face had gone very pale. "Second, I've set up a trust for Emma. Everything I have, my savings, my settlement from the airline, everything goes to her, not you. You have no access, no control, no authority over any of it. She'll be taken care of. You will not be. You can't. I already have. Emma is my daughter. You can't turn her against me. I'm not turning her against you. I'm protecting her from you. There's a difference." I stood up. My ribs no longer hurt. My hands were steady. "You taught me something important," I said. "You taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that family isn't something you're born into, it's something you earn, and you didn't earn it." "Mom, please, my name is Margaret," I said. "You lost the right to call me Mom when you celebrated my death." I walked to the door. "Wait," Diana said. Her voice broke. "Please, I'm sorry, I made mistakes. I said terrible things, but I'm still your daughter. You can't just write me off." I turned back, looked at her one more time. "Yes," I said, "I can." Then I left. In the elevator going down, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long storm, after years of noise and chaos and constant need. I walked out of the building into October sunshine. The air was crisp, clean, full of fall. Somewhere nearby, someone was selling roasted chestnuts. The smell reminded me of Robert, of dates we'd had 40 years ago in this same downtown. I called Grace. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" "Free." "Good. Come to the office tomorrow. We'll need to file one more set of documents now that you've officially resurfaced. Straighten out the identity situation. Make Margaret Hartwell whole again. What about Margaret Fletcher? She served her purpose. You don't need her anymore." But I wasn't sure that was true. Margaret Hartwell had been invisible, had been taken for granted, had been erased. Margaret Fletcher had been powerful, had been clear, had been free. Maybe I could be both. Maybe I could be whoever I decided to be. I walked through downtown, past the coffee shops and bookstores and ordinary people living their ordinary lives. I walked until I found a bench by the river, and I sat there for a long time watching the water move past, constant and unstoppable, carrying everything forward whether we were ready or not. And I was here, alive, whole, free. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything I hadn't known I needed. 3 weeks later, I drove past my old house for the last time. A different car sat in the driveway now, a minivan with a child's bicycle strapped to the back. Through the front window, I could see movement. A woman hanging curtains, a man carrying boxes. The ordinary chaos of a family making a space their own. They'd painted the front door blue. Robert would have liked that. I didn't stop, just drove past slowly, memorizing this final version of a place I'd lived for 32 years. The maple tree in the front yard had more gold leaves than last time I'd seen it. Soon it would be bare. Soon winter would come and cover everything in clean white snow, and the new family would make their first Christmas in that house, and my ghost would finally leave those walls. It was enough. Emma was waiting for me at the coffee shop in Millbrook, the same one where I'd revealed myself 3 weeks ago. She had 2 lattes and a paper bag with croissants. Grandma. She stood to hug me, still careful with my ribs even though they'd fully healed, still calling me Grandma even though I'd told her she could call me Margaret if she wanted. Some things you don't give up. We sat by the window and watched the town move through its afternoon. I'd been in Millbrook almost 2 months now, long enough for the barista to know my order, long enough for my landlord to smile when she saw me, long enough to feel like maybe this could be home. Mum's filed paperwork, Emma said, challenging the trust, challenging the will, challenging everything. I know. Grace told me. She'll lose, right? She'll lose. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I went to see her last week. I hadn't expected that. How was it? Hard, she cried. Said I was all she had left. Said you'd turned me against her. Did she ask about your classes? Your thesis, anything about your life? Emma was quiet for a moment. No. She talked about what you'd done to her, what I could do to fix it, how if I just talked to you, made you see reason. She looked at me. She never asked about me. I'm sorry, don't be. I needed to see it. To really see it. She pulled something from her bag. The recipe box. My recipe box. The one Diana had claimed to donate. Where did you Mom's garage? She was going to throw it away eventually, but she hadn't gotten to it yet. I took it when she wasn't looking. Emma pushed it across the table. I thought you'd want it back. I opened the box with shaking hands. The cards were all there, worn and stained and marked with notations in my handwriting from 50 years of cooking. Robert's favourite pot roast, Diana's birthday cake, the one she'd requested every year until she turned 18 and decided she was too sophisticated for my baking. Emma's chocolate chip cookies, the recipe perfected over dozens of batches until I'd found exactly the right balance of crispy and soft. Thank you, I whispered. She should have given it to me when I asked, Emma said. That's what hurt most. Not that she sold the house or took the money. That she wouldn't even let me have 1 box of your recipes. Like they were nothing. Like you were nothing. I looked at my granddaughter, 22 years old, fierce and clear, and unwilling to accept invisibility for herself or anyone she loved, and felt something settle in my chest. This was what I'd been fighting for. Not money, not houses, not revenge. This, a young woman, learning she didn't have to shrink herself to make others comfortable, learning that boundaries weren't selfish, learning that walking away from people who erased you wasn't cruelty, it was survival. "You're going to be okay," I told her. "I know. You taught me that." If you're reading this, if you recognize yourself in any part of this story, I need you to hear something. You are not selfish for wanting to be seen. You are not demanding for expecting basic respect. You are not difficult for refusing to disappear. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant being available always, meant saying yes, meant putting everyone else's needs before my own until I forgot I had needs at all. I became invisible slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it happening. One phone call at a time, one expectation at a time, one moment of being taken for granted that I told myself didn't matter, until I heard my daughter celebrate my death and I realized I'd already been dead for years. To the people who loved me without conditions, I had always been alive. To the one who loved me only for what I could provide, I was already a ghost. You don't owe anyone your invisibility. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them permission to erase you just because they find your existence inconvenient. And you are allowed to choose, no matter how old you are, no matter how late it seems, to stop being taken for granted. It won't be easy. There will be loneliness, guilt, moments when you wonder if you're being too harsh, too unforgiving, too selfish. But here's what I learned. The people who accuse you of being selfish for setting boundaries are usually the ones who benefited from you having none. I'm 73 years old. I have a one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore in a town where nobody knows my history. I have a granddaughter who calls me every Wednesday and brings me coffee on Thursdays. I have a recipe box full of handwritten cards and a storage unit full of photo albums nobody wanted. I lost my house, lost my daughter, lost the life I spent 7 decades building, and yet I sit in my apartment in the late afternoon light and I drink my tea slowly, deliberately, watching the steam rise in patterns that mean nothing and everything. I read books I've always meant to read. I walk through town without purpose or destination. I exist without apology. The maple trees are almost bare now. Winter is coming. I'll spend it here in this small apartment, learning who I am when I'm not performing function for anyone else. The silence doesn't press on my ribs anymore. It holds me gently, like something precious, like space I've earned, like home.